History doesn't always scream when it changes. Sometimes it whispers, falters, and bleeds. Welcome to the skewed past, where we revisit the precise moments when everything shifted. Today, we tell the story of Montezuma II, not through myth or legend, but through the tension of a collapsing world and a god-king whose death shattered an empire. In the early 1500s, the Aztec Empire was a marvel of engineering, artistry, and military power. At its heart stood Tenochtitlan, a sprawling metropolis built on an island in the middle of Lake Texcoco, with causeways connecting it to the mainland, a complex canal system, aqueducts, floating gardens called chinampas, and towering temples. It rivaled the greatest cities of the Old World. Montezuma II, or Montezuma Xocoyotzin, ruled over this vast empire. As the ninth Huey Tlatoani, or Great Speaker, Montezuma wasn't just a political leader. He was a divine intermediary between the gods and his people. He lived in opulence, surrounded by an elite class of nobles, priests, and warriors. But his rule was growing increasingly authoritarian. He raised taxes, tightened control over vassal states, and expanded the empire through military campaigns. Many tributary cities, especially the Tlaxcalans, resented Aztec dominance and were waiting for an opportunity to rise. Montezuma was deeply religious, consulting priests, reading omens, and interpreting signs with growing anxiety. In the years leading up to the Spanish arrival, he reportedly received 9 ominous portents: comets in the sky, spontaneous fires, deformed children, and eerie voices in the wind. These were interpreted as warnings of catastrophe, and Montezuma became increasingly paralyzed by fear and prophecy. In 1519, Hernán Cortés landed on the coast of present-day Veracruz with about 500 soldiers, 16 horses, and a few cannons. He was a man of ambition, defiance, and cunning. Technically, he was acting against the orders of the governor of Cuba, Diego Velázquez, but Cortés had no intention of turning back. He wanted fame, fortune, and a legacy that would outshine all others. He quickly formed alliances with local indigenous groups, most notably the Totonacs and later the Tlaxcalans, longtime enemies of the Aztecs. He also captured and baptized a Nahua woman known as La Malinche, who became his translator, advisor, and eventually mother to his first son. Through her, Cortés gained intimate knowledge of Aztec politics, rivalries, and weaknesses. When word of these strangers reached Montezuma, he was cautious. He sent emissaries bearing gifts, gold, feathers, fine textiles, and ceremonial items. But the gifts backfired. To Cortés, they confirmed the empire's wealth and vulnerability. He marched inland, gaining allies and territory, burning his ships to prevent retreat. Every step he took was both a calculated move and a test of fate. In November 1519, Cortés and his men entered Tenochtitlan. The city was stunning beyond their imagination. The causeways, markets, temples, and order rivaled anything they had seen in Europe. Montezuma welcomed them as honored guests. It is still debated whether he believed Cortés was the returning god Quetzalcoatl, or simply a foreign dignitary with dangerous potential. Montezuma housed the Spaniards in the palace of his late father, Axayacatl, and offered them food, gifts, and guides. Cortés, wary and calculating, took Montezuma hostage shortly thereafter, using him as leverage to control the city. The Aztec nobility was outraged but hesitant to act, unsure whether their god-king was acting of his own will or under duress. For months, Montezuma remained a prisoner in his own city, giving orders under Spanish watch, appearing before his people under guard. His divine authority eroded, and whispers of betrayal began to stir. In May 1520, Cortés left Tenochtitlan temporarily to confront Spanish forces loyal to Governor Velázquez. While he was gone, his second-in-command, Pedro de Alvarado, ordered a massacre of unarmed Aztec nobles during a religious ceremony at the Great Temple. It was a catastrophic error. When Cortés returned, the city was in full revolt. The Spanish barricaded themselves inside the palace under siege. In a desperate attempt to calm the population, they brought Montezuma to speak from a balcony. What happened next is cloaked in contradiction. Spanish accounts say he pleaded for peace and was struck by stones thrown by his own people. Aztec sources claim the Spanish killed him once it became clear he was no longer useful. Either way, Montezuma was mortally wounded and died a few days later. His body was unceremoniously thrown from the palace. The death of Montezuma marked the point of no return. The divine protector of the city was gone. Panic turned to rage. On the night of June 30th, 1520, the Spanish attempted to flee the city under cover of darkness. Laden with stolen gold, they moved silently along the causeways. But the Aztecs were waiting. La Noche Triste, the night of sorrows, became a bloodbath. Hundreds of Spaniards and their indigenous allies were killed. Many drowned in the canals, their armor and gold dragging them to the bottom. Cortés barely escaped with his life, wounded and humiliated. But it was not the end. In 1521, Cortés returned with thousands of indigenous allies and built 13 brigantines, small warships, which he launched on Lake Texcoco. These ships allowed the Spanish to take control of the waters surrounding Tenochtitlan and cut off supply lines into the city. The once thriving canals of the Aztec capital, symbols of order and abundance, became battlegrounds. The siege lasted over 75 days. The Spanish used their ships to block food, water, and reinforcements from reaching the city. Skirmishes broke out in the waterways daily, with Aztec canoes darting between islands and under bridges, launching ambushes. But the Spanish naval advantage was overwhelming. Eventually, they breached the causeways and began fighting block by block through the city. By August, Tenochtitlan was a shattered skeleton of its former self. Bodies lined the canals. The streets were filled with disease and starvation. Cortés captured Cuauhtémoc, Montezuma's successor, and declared victory. But there was no celebration, only silence and ruins. What had been a jewel of Mesoamerican civilization was reduced to rubble. But the first fracture, the moment when it all began to fall, was the death of Montezuma. Was Montezuma a tyrant undone by hubris, a ruler frozen by prophecy, or a scapegoat caught between two collapsing worlds? Whatever version you believe, one thing is certain. The day he died, the empire he ruled began to die with him. This was not just the fall of a man, it was the unraveling of a world. This is the skewed past, and this was Montezuma's last breath.